Hello, welcome to this episode of our discussion forum.
I'm Andy McNeil.
And I'm Fran Solomon, and we are thrilled to be your host for these forums. The AMF App Members Discussion Forum is brought to you by Heal Grief, a social support network creating community after someone has died. Everything we do is inspired by our core belief that no one should ever grieve alone.
Our goal with this forum is to bring our community members an opportunity to engage with some amazing people and to discuss various ways to normalize and educate the community at large about issues of grief. Our guests today have drawn from their own traumatic grief experiences and took back control of their lives through thinking into results, a method they attribute to their success. Kelly Pascuzzi is an entrepreneur, philanthropist, mom, wife, and a life and business coach, helping people develop the leader within, which parlays to every aspect of improved leadership in their lives. Kelly works side by side with Bob Proctor, chairman of Proctor Gallagher Institute, as a leadership and management consultant to individuals and business teams everywhere.
Robert Pascuzzi went from having no money in the bank, actually paying his mortgage with a credit card, to starting and building a 401k management division from $0 to more than $2.5 billion in assets under his management. While being a partner and director of the corporate retirement plan division at Creative Planning in Leawood, Kansas, Robert's division oversaw more than 1,500 corporate sponsored retirement plans with more than 100,000 plan participants. Creative Planning Inc. has managed $48 billion in assets with clients in all 50 states. Robert offers his own day-long conference, Live Rich Today. He coaches and consults for clients nationally. He is an author of several books, including a suspense novel, The Ravine, and both are co-producers of the soon-to-be-released motion picture film based on a horrendous crime called The Ravine. It's filled with suspense, trauma, and drama, and how the essential role of hope plays in healing after tragedy. Kelly, Robert, and our audience, welcome.
Thank you,
Thank
Fran.
you, Fran. Thank you, Andy.
So you've both had a journey from despair to unimaginable success. Let's dive in. Tell us about thinking into results. How has that changed your lives?
Thinking into results has changed my life because, going through the experience that we did, first of all, I never asked to go to that space of dark grief. And I never thought I could probably come out on the other side with a different mindset. But it was really understanding how I use my thoughts. Because what I'm thinking controls what I'm vibrating, what I'm feeling, and that's the energy that I'm sharing. And that is what is attracting back to my life. So when I got those in alignment and understood through really the grief process, it showed me an understanding that all three of those things, the mind, the body, the soul, it's really all one. And I had an understanding that when they're all in alignment, I'm moving in the direction that I want and I'm attracting back to my life what I want. But I really had to get an understanding of how my thinking could shift.
Mm-hmm. That's really good. And I want to echo that, until we understand how to control the thought process, in other words, the meanings is so important because only we choose the meaning in any event. And even when it's a really tragic situation like we experienced and it was so sudden, it was an emotional impact, and many of you have probably experienced this. And so immediately the mind is thrown into a state of flux, confusion. And the process of working through that and really understanding for yourself and choosing what is going to be the meaning from this event. Because if we choose something that is going to help us move forward, then we're going to process things a lot differently. And that's what I think Kelly and I had to get to, is we had to look for some empowering meaning, something positive, even though at the time it didn't happen overnight. I mean, at the time we weren't there, but over time we began to shift. And through this program of thinking into results, which we got into, we started to realize that obviously none of us control any events. We don't have control over any events really, but we do have control over the meaning, and we do have control over what we will do. And when we choose the meaning is going to drive or really dictate what we're willing to do or not do. And we can get stuck, and this is what happens. I think we were stuck for a while. We were stuck in a dark place or just a bad situation because we were looking from a lens that did not really empower us. We were looking through it from a very dark side. And what we came to realize through thinking into results, and what one of the things Bob teaches is the law of polarity, meaning that for every negative, there's a positive. For every up, there's a down. The tide comes in, the tide comes out, the sun sets, the sun comes up. There's certain laws. In one of the laws, the law of polarity, says that if something is negative, if you look, you can find something positive. It's not easy, and it doesn't happen overnight. And this has been a 10-year journey for us. But looking back now, it all started with that shift in our mindset.
And I want to add to what he's saying in regards to when you change what you're looking for, we started to be open. We started that reception of our intuition, or the idea surfacing from the source, which I call God. And I don't know if we wouldn't have been looking if we would have not been aware when that idea surfaced, to bring the story to life, to use it as the light, the positive spectrum, the other side of what that darkness was, to really help the world with this message of hope and forgiveness.
So can you share a bit about the trauma and the journey? Because many of our participants here really are in the field of grief, and they're working with so many bereaved people that are in that place where hope is not necessarily on the forefront of their journey.
Well, on the tail end of my journey, I came into a greater understanding that it's really about acceptance. And when I was able to accept it for what it was, that gave me the ability to actually forgive it and let it go. But obviously that wasn't an overnight thing for me. It was the ability to really understand and hold on to that promise that God would use everything for good, even something this dark. But I had to accept it. And it took me a while to get there, to accept the event, but also to find the good for it. Like we're talking about, I had to find some good in that, accept it, find the good, and I had to let go of the rest. And ironically, I really believe that the book was God's message of forgiveness to the world, the book of the Ravine, but the actual filming was my own personal journey to find that space of acceptance, to be able to release it and forgive it.
Yeah. And that came a long time afterwards. So it definitely, everyone processes grief differently and on their own timeline. But I do, and parlay to what you're saying there, honey, I do like the Wayne Dyer, his saying that it goes like this: when you change the way you look at something, what you look at changes. And I think we have to be able to pivot and shift to that space where we can start to look at things differently, because our perception dictates so much, and our perception becomes our reality. So we have to try to shift and start to look at things differently.
It's interesting. A lot of the work that I've done with bereaved families, but I would say children, young children, all the way through to adults, 101 years old, whatever age it might be, is there's a real part of the process that's the telling of the story. And not only telling of the story, but telling about your perception of the story and what you believe about yourself and the world around you, and all of those things as a result of the story that or the experience that you've gone through. And I know a lot of our participants today sit with families and they hear people working through these things. And in some ways, as you're saying, reshaping some of their perspectives and how they think about it, but not even how they think about the event. It's how they think about themselves, their life, the possibilities that are out there, even in the midst of living with these, maybe a horror that they've experienced in their own life.
Right. And that's really good, Andy. And I think one of the things that can really be below the surface, but really detrimental for us to be able to move forward is the emotion of guilt. And one of the things I know in our own experience, initially I felt really guilty that I didn't see this coming. This was somebody that I knew for 20 years, and I never saw any of this coming. And I felt guilty, I think, right afterwards, in the sense that I should have reached out to this person. I should have had a better, understanding of where he was. There were signs, obviously, there's always signs, but I let him go and just kind of dismiss things. And so that was a big piece for me, is being able to just release that and move forward. And so I know that there's so many different emotions that we process when these types of things happen. But it's almost, in a sense, I think it's the ability to kind of step outside of ourselves and just witness or be aware of the emotions we're experiencing, so that we can choose how we're going to handle those emotions. Because there's another law that says nothing's good or bad. It's just our perception of it. It's what we decide it is. And so I had to really work on that, to decide that, I need to let go of this. It wasn't something at the end of the day I could probably control anyway. And the guilt was only eating me up and holding me back from being able to move forward. So.
But it's interesting when you talk about perception, how we all see the same thing through a different lens, because, Robert's talking about a perception, a sense of guilt that he maybe wasn't aware that something was happening. My sense of guilt came in the feeling that I can't be happy again, or it's not okay to feel joy again. And I maybe bought into a belief, or maybe culture states it has to be this long of a period before you can experience that feeling again. And I just had to step in a space of, I know who I am and my own self-image and concept, to say, this is the meaning I attach to it, and it's okay to experience joy, and I don't have to feel guilty about it.
How much, I'm curious, often the thoughts that we've shaped around so many events that maybe happened, even in our childhood, just growing up in life, sometimes can become thought patterns. And we don't even realize that that's our tendency, right? To kind of go that direction. So I'm curious if you could talk a little bit about, once you start thinking about, considering your thoughts and how you're perceiving certain events, how does that lead you to maybe even discover certain patterns of thinking in your own self that, it's a little different than I'm changing a singular thought. I need to reshape the way I tend to think when certain things happen in life. And some of that is, we're not even conscious sometimes of some of those things.
Yeah, no, that's really great, Andy. And you hit it head on, because what you're describing, and the way we would term it, is a paradigm. You're describing a paradigm, and a paradigm is a collection of habits, habitual ways of doing things that will have, in essence, habitual control over our behavior. And almost all behavior is habitual. That's what you're saying. It's just that we're not aware of it. And so and that's one of the ways we take control, is we have to become aware of our habitual ways of doing things, and our habitual ways of thinking about certain things. This happens, I react that way. This happens, I go. It's like Pavlov's dog, and I was as guilty of this as anybody back before we really started getting into study and understanding the mind. And so the mind is, I think of it like a muscle. And if we don't condition the muscle, just like if we don't go into a gym or we don't get exercise, we lose it. What you don't use, you lose. And the mind is the same way. We have to exercise the mind. And to Kelly and I, one of the ways we do that is we study. And obviously, Thinking into Results is one of the best programs, the most effective programs I've ever come in contact with getting us to understand us, getting me to understand me. And there's great power in that. And that's how you take control of your life. Otherwise, we become victims of circumstance. We're like a plaything, just bouncing from here to there, just, based on outside stimulus, things that are coming to us from every direction all the time. So we have this thought energy that's coming to and through us in our conscious mind all day long, right? What we have to do is become aware of the images, the pictures, the thoughts that we're entertaining. Because what we're entertaining in our conscious mind, not to get too far into this, but this is some of the things that Kelly and I teach, will automatically be impressed into the subconscious. And the subconscious is where we act everything out. That's where we get the result. And that's also where the paradigm sits. And if we're not aware of the paradigms, in other words, we all have limiting paradigms or negative paradigms. In contrast, we all have positive paradigms, things that are helping us go in the direction we want to go. But if we don't become aware of the negative paradigms that are controlling our habitual behavior and getting us the results that we really don't want, then we're going to remain stuck. And when you go back to, working through these issues that we're talking about, that's where a lot of us stay stuck because we don't understand how to move forward.
Well, just to jump on that, when you say the word stuck, after that experience, I did feel stuck because the meaning was I don't have any control over any of this, but I do have control now that I understand how I respond to it, how I think about it, and the meaning that I attach. And I came to an understanding that, instead of something happening to me, it's happening for me. And all of these experiences are essential for me to move in another space, to strengthen me, to grow my concept, to be able to deliver a stronger, more universal message to the world. And so it is a tendency through programming, like you said, even at childhood, to be programmed to react to the circumstances externally and say, I can't change this. My results will always be the same because I don't have control. But you actually do. You have the ability to decide for yourself how you're going to respond.
Right. And in this movie, the book and the movie to us are the physical manifestation of what we're talking about, is that it is possible to take an event, and we wouldn't have traded. Obviously, if we could go back, we would trade it all, that our friends were still here. But it did happen, and thinking in a different way to us has been the end result is this manifestation of something that our hope is it's going to affect millions of people around the world, and I truly believe it will, because the message is so strong in this film. So I think that's what gives us the momentum, and it will give you the momentum too, to move forward. You've got to have a reason why. You've got to have a reason why you're going to get up every morning and move forward. And so if you find enough reasons come first, answers come second. I would encourage everyone out there, if this is, if you're in a dark spot, if you listen to this, you've got to start finding reasons why you're going to choose to move forward. And if you find enough reasons, we can do anything, but we've got to have the reasons why. And again, I think it goes back to, we'll do more for the people that we love than we will do ourselves. And I think Kelly and I looked at ourselves and said, we have a young family here. We've got to process this in a different way. We've got to move forward. Because it can't just be all about us. And that's what gave us, I think, the momentum to do it.
So Kelly, when did you were you doing Thinking into Results and then you became a coach, or were you coaching and then implemented the Thinking into Results?
Well, we have always been into some form of self-help, study. but I really don't feel that we had there was a missing piece, let's say, and we got introduced to Bob Proctor, and we were so impressed with the material and started seeing different results in our life that we hired him personally to coach us, and then went through the program, and I decided to start facilitating it with individuals and corporations. And it's been a way for me to give back, which has been really fun, but you know, as I'm giving, I'm also receiving, and I have grown exponentially, you know, as a person because of it.
Great. I'd like to see if anybody from our discussion group would like to jump in and chime in, maybe ask a question. If so, you can unmute yourself. Bob,
While
Robert,
we're waiting,
yeah.
go ahead. I was going to say while we're waiting on folks, there are a couple of points I wanted to make just about our field and the field of bereavement and grief. One of the components that I saw when I worked with families was this desire to find some sense of hope. People would quite often come to support, and we did a lot of individual and family counseling. We did groups as well, but mostly individual and family counseling. And it would be families that have come in, and they're coming there because the patterns and the things that they did have in their life were working until this thing happened that happened to them, and it stopped working. And so they're looking for, quite often they were looking for, how can I, one, live with what has happened? And in some way, as you were saying, you know, have some sense of purpose in my life, something I'm living for or living toward, and just understanding that process. So I'm wondering if some of those listening to it have some thoughts on that, or even some ideas about it, or can share some of what you've seen in the folks that you're working with. Because I am curious about how thinking into results can impact certainly the bereavement process, but also even thinking about just the situation we're in as a society right now, and what is happening in the minds of people who are quarantined at home, and we had a certain way of living. Our life had at least mine did, had a certain groove to it, right? And that's, you know, that's now different. So I'm curious about those things. I've put those couple of things out to our folks chiming in as well.
Yeah, I think what, you know, to your point, Andy, we've been forcefully disrupted, most of us, with the virus, where typically something traumatic has to happen for us to go through an emotional impact, you know, and it could be a negative thing, you know, like we experienced, and probably many of the other people out there have experienced. But with the virus, it was, you know, it wasn't something anybody chose. Obviously, it's a very horrible situation, and it is an emotional impact. You know, it's a difficult thing to deal with. But again, to your point, it goes back to, what are we going to choose for the meaning here, right? And for a lot of people, I think this is a time, and I know Kelly and I have used this as a time to really get deeper into studying, and really, because if we don't direct the focus of our mind, then just by osmosis, right, it's going to tend to kind of drift. And we're so many things coming at us all day long through media and TV and social media and all these things that, you know, Jim Rohn had an old quote I loved. He said, you've got to stand guard at the door to your mind. Okay. You can't just let anything be dumped into your mental processes. And it doesn't, you know, again, these are things that aren't that easy to do. You know, it took me many, many years to get where I am right now, but you can get there through a focused study, for example. And it is having something that just takes you from A to B to C to D. And to Andy, that's my point, is that's what, for us, Thinking into Results did. It's just one program. There's a lot of programs out there, but Thinking into Results is basically 58 years of intensive study into these subjects, into the mind. And the beautiful thing about it, and this isn't a commercial, but just to let you know how easy it is, it's just plain English. A lot of the stuff that, that's out there, it can get really, really deep and it can become confusing. But what we really were attracted to, as Kelly said, about thinking and results, because at the time we got into it, we had already experienced a pretty high level of success in our professions and our personal lives. But it was kind of the next step. The things that we didn't really realize that took us to the next level. And it is a organized study. And that's the thing, is it's all about awareness. We can't change what we're not aware of. And so we have to become aware of the paradigms or the limiting beliefs that are holding us back. So Andy, that's how it deals with bereavement, or that's how it deals really with any topic. It's very universal, because the mind, if we don't understand ourselves, it's going to be a rough road. It really is. We've got to kind of just, it's like being,
Like someone that won't get out of their own way.
Yeah. It's like a jail that we live in, but we're not even aware we're in a jail, if that makes sense.
But what was interesting when Andy asked that question, you talk about being involuntarily disrupted. There's probably people that felt immune to the grief process, but right now I can't think of anything that has moved through the entire world at one time that is affecting all of us. So we're all connected in that regard, that, everyone is experiencing some form of grief, but it may not be grief as in death, but it's loss of income, loss of a job, loss of whatever the loss is. It's really interesting because people are all looking to connect with one another right now. And one of the things that I've really been focused on is just going to service, like trying to leave others with the impression of increase right now, like serving others, leaving them with the impression of gratitude. And it makes you feel so good knowing what you're moving towards. Like today, I just want to leave someone with the impression of increase, and we can all do that. So it's just a really interesting time right now.
One of the things I would, and I'm going to speak for myself, but I'm in this helping profession, and I know we have a tendency, who are helpers, to help everyone else. Like, we're constantly focused on the needs of everyone, and then we don't take care of ourselves. And I say it because I am one of us that we tend to do this. And even when I'm speaking and providing seminars, one of the things I always bring up is our tendency in our field to do this. We will have conversations about how we can help other people, but when it comes to even ourselves, and one of the things I would hope, and again, put this out to our group, is what are those ways that we are doing that? Like, what are the challenges that we're facing right now? I mean, you're hearing stories regularly about healthcare workers who are taxed. They're at their wits' end, many of them. And one of the things I see in the bereavement field is we're all attempting to prepare ourselves to be there for people who are impacted by what is happening. My question is always, what are we doing not only to prepare ourselves to be there for people, but what are we doing about our own thoughts and health and all of those things, so that we can be there for people. So that's another thing I would throw into this discussion.
Because grief, I think, I heard somebody say once, and I think it's true, and maybe you can help me remember this, but we're always in a grieving process. Our whole life is really moving through those stages, because it's not, we think of grieving, I think, when this horrific event happened, but you can be grieving, a divorce, or you can be grieving a job loss or income loss, or grief is something that we're constantly dealing with. And if we, that's why I think it's so insidious and can be so detrimental if we don't start to understand how to work through it. And it starts at the beginning versus the end, if that makes sense. It starts with having a mindset and how you approach each day, because that's really all we have is today. And how are we going to approach today? And that's why Kelly's saying at just a very basic level, having a game plan, for example, of waking up and just saying the first thing I'm going to do today is I'm going to go to gratitude, and I'm going to sit down and I'm going to write out 10 things I'm grateful for. I can assure you that sounds very simplistic, but it's very powerful, because it's impossible to hold two ideas in your mind at the same time. We can't be thinking about what we're grateful for and at the same time thinking of something negative. It's impossible to do it. So these little things about approaching each day will incrementally, not overnight, there's no magic bullet obviously, but incrementally we'll start to shift and we'll pivot and we'll start to move in the right direction. But that's, I think, what you mean by just, directing your mind in the right way.
Mm-hmm. So then, as someone is going through their grief journey, an exercise might be, what are we grateful for?
Yeah, even if you say, well, I don't know, I can't think of anything. Well, okay. But if you did know, you could probably come up with one thing, right? Maybe two things that you could be grateful for. We all have things. Even in the darkest moments, if we really worked at it, we could come up with something. And that's one of the things that when we were going through some struggles, and not just this scenario, but other scenarios, I really tried to stay in gratitude. It was really hard. It's very hard to do it, but it is possible. And if we're not able to do that, and that's where I think we really get stuck, because it's either we're growing or we're disintegrating, so to speak. Nothing stays the same. Nothing oscillates at the same level. So know that if we're not moving ourselves ahead, we're automatically going backwards. So that's the challenge that we have each day.
So we have somebody who wrote a comment, and it's identified as iPad 2. I don't know who that is. Would you like to take your mic off and share it, or do you prefer that I read it?
No, I'm sorry about that. It's Camille. I'm trying to use my iPad, and I'm not really familiar with it. But I have a tendency I do the self-care thing, but then I push myself. I've been doing so much with this COVID. We had our biggest fundraiser of the year. I'm writing grants, and I kind of have that light at the end of the tunnel. And that's part of my nature too. It's like that addict, like my ex-addict. It's like, and then I really do a good job at rewarding myself. And I just really chills. But it is maintaining that balance of making sure I do my meditation and the things, or I would completely short circuit. And I've been doing gratitude lists for 30 years. And I just, it was a strengths test, and mine was gratitude. And I was like, really, gratitude? What am I going to do with that? And then this PhD guy did this hour presentation on how gratitude physically changes your brain chemistry and has such great benefits. So I'm like, okay, I'm going with gratitude. I'll take that one. So thanks.
That's a great point. Really, it releases endorphins, and endorphins automatically put us in our whole vibration shifts immediately. So that's really great. Appreciate you sharing that.
Does anybody else do gratitude?
I know things too, and I know Kelly, you do too. But if you just get in the mindset and have some fun with this, back when the drive-throughs were open, but you go through a Starbucks, what I would like to do is pay for somebody behind us, behind you, and it might cost you a couple bucks, and it's you're doing something nice for somebody else, but I think more importantly, how are you going to approach the rest of your day? How are you going to feel about yourself? There's just little ways to shift yourself and feel abundant and feel positive about yourself and what you can do. And that might have cost a couple dollars, but those little things will create big shifts over time.
Yeah, no, and most of us are in the
It's like you take back control of in that moment, you take back control of your thoughts if they're going elsewhere. That's a great point.
Yeah, 'cause if you build the muscle, the mind is, to me, it's the muscle that we have to build, and no other muscle is more important. I go to the gym every day. I'm a fanatic about working out. I don't miss, and I'll work out for an hour and a half every day. But the thing is, okay, we're working our physical body, but what are we doing to work our minds? We're physical beings, we're spiritual beings living in a physical body. How much time do we spend on our minds, on the greatest gift that we've ever been, gifted? It is the mind and the power of the mind. When we start to learn how our mind works, and Kelly, there's so many great books, cybernetics by Maxwell Maltz. We're into that one right now. And it's so interesting because you can never stop learning this stuff. It goes on forever. Like Bob's become a good friend of ours, Bob Proctor. He's 85 now. And every day, he'll be texting me occasionally at 6 a.m, and he's studying every day. And, I look at him and you would think, well, here's a guy that's known worldwide as probably the leading authority on human potential. But here he is saying, I don't know it all, after 59 years of studying. And that's the thing that inspires me is, just get up every day and attack the day. And that's all we have, because that's all we have. I mean, tomorrow's not guaranteed. We've got to be able to let go the past. We only have this moment. And that's what I think we focused on with this COVID-19 situation is I'm doing what I can do every day, and that's it. We can't affect the whole world all at one time as individuals. We can do little things over time that will help ourselves and therefore help other people. And that is our mindset. It works for us. And it helps me at the end of the day feel good about the day. And I think that's the thing. At the end of the day, if you can feel good about your day, what you did the last so many hours, then it's a positive day, and that's it. And you go to the next day.
So do you find many people come to you already in despair, or do you find people coming to you who you coach at a level that they think is optimal or not optimal because they're coming to you, that they're satisfied with but want to hit that optimal level?
Yeah, I think, we all have something in our lives we want to improve, whether we admit it or not. We do. Everybody does. I think, a lot of people come to us just a little short on money. We're all born rich. Some of us are just a little short on money, but there's ways to fix that. We were a little short on money back in the day too, and I didn't understand what was going on. But a lot of the financial issues we were having, what I discovered was it was the epicenter of it was my mind. It was the negative, habitual thought processes and patterns that were ingrained in my conscious mind: lack, limitation, worry, doubt, fear around money. It could be around any subject, but for me, it was really money. And I didn't understand what was going on. I was conditioned, and Andy, this is where the paradigm kicks back in, because we're all conditioned through, our past environment, social conditioning, or, who we grew up with. That social piece is really a big influence, and I just didn't understand it. But when I started to study and became aware of what I was really doing, that's when I was able to start over time moving the needle in the other direction. But
I think Bob Proctor always said, you're never going to be able to outperform your paradigm. And what we find is most of that paradigm is actually wrapped within our self-image. And people that are looking for, to really change their results, they first have to understand who they truly are and that they have infinite potential within. And once they come into that understanding and start applying the laws, the universal laws that are exact, the results externally start to change. But you have to start inside to affect the outside.
Yeah, that's a good point, honey, because that was one of the things that I was really not aware of. We both weren't, was that there are laws, universal laws that control everything. And once we understand the laws, then we can start using the laws to help us. The probability will start to shift, that we'll start to see the type of results we really want in our lives. Otherwise, what happens, and this is where we were a lot of the times, was we're responding to outside stimulus, and it's like, we were just bouncing all over whatever we see, hear, smell, taste, and touch, whatever was coming in, the senses, what the senses are telling us, then that's how we were responding. We thought that was our reality, but it wasn't our reality. We were just telling ourselves it was our reality. It was just our perception at the time. And so that goes back again to, as you study and your awareness grows of who you really are, then your perception of what's possible will start to shift. But they're all interconnected.
Yeah. I have a really good friend and we joke with each other all the time. It's sort of joking, but it's also reminding ourselves. So sort of being nerds, we watched and followed the series of The Matrix when we were, younger. And there's a line in the movie where, the main character says to this kid who's making spoons float, who says, how do you do that? And the kid looks at him and goes, well, there is no spoon. Right. And so he's kind of talking about our perception, how we create our own idea of reality. Right. And so every now and then, this friend and I, if I'm like down and talking about all the things that aren't working out and all this other stuff, he'll look at me and go, there is no spoon, just to remind me that I'm like I have created this whole idea in my head of what my limitations are, what I can and can't do. And in a lot of ways, I'm getting the results that I've limited myself with, and I'll do the same to him. I'll just pop it in. There is no spoon.
Camille, did you want to share your idea? Camille?
Well, I just put in the chat, but when you were talking about gratitude we have a theme of the month in December, obviously it's gratitude, and our kids write their gratitudes on trees. And I'm thinking right now you could do it with a garden, because in Michigan, our little flowers are just starting to come up. And so like the kids could at home draw flowers or shapes and then write their gratitudes on, because like you guys said, in a time like this, sometimes it's harder to focus on the cup half full versus half empty. And sometimes it's just flipping that switch to go, oh yeah, that's right. I still have electricity, or I have whatever, so that I can stay connected to my people.
A great idea.
Oh, that's really good point.
Yeah, Camille runs an agency in Michigan, working with children who are grieving a death of their person. It's a nice idea. It's a great idea.
Thank you.
I do want to take a moment to, before we come to a close, to really acknowledge the two of you, Kelly and Robert, because really what you're doing with your film is presenting it in a way that is going to create so much more of an awareness of the grief processes. You've done an amazing job, and I know we're not trying to spill any beans here about the characters and the whole idea of the film, but you've portrayed grief from so many different perspectives and did it so accurately. And then bringing in the hope component to really affect lives of so many that just can't see the hope in the midst of their grief today. So we want to thank you for that. And we want to thank you guys so much for choosing Heal Grief as your charity partner. And we're hoping that a lot of this is really going to help the industry, the bereavement care industry as a whole. So we thank you for that.
Well, we appreciate you having us on today. It was a pleasure.
Yes.
And Andy, you want to, so for the audience, if anybody wants to connect?
Yeah.
Andy, did we
as we kind of wrap things up, we do want to know whether if people want to connect with the two of you or with the film or book or in any way, how would they go about making that connection?
Well, you can find us on Instagram or Facebook at Kelly Pascuzzi. Or you could check us out at clnow.com. And so it's got information in regards to the film, in regards to what we do with our coaching. And we'd love to hear from you.
And there's more on the movie at the ravine.info, that website. It's got the cast and everybody involved in the movie there. It's a great site, the ravine.info.
Wonderful. Does anybody
Great.
in our audience have any closing questions or thoughts? Okay, then.
Well, Fran, Andy, thank you again. It's a pleasure to be on with you and all you're doing at Heal Grief. It's an honor to be working with you guys.
Thank you so much. Really, very inspiring. Thank you so much.